Hi everyone. Today we will paint a specialist character from Etherfields, the board game. This video will be split into 3 parts. First we will analyze the artwork and decide what colors we will use. Second, we will paint the first layers on every important part and check if our colors suit the mini. Third, we will make volumes pop by using highlighting and shading techniques. I will also recommend you some interesting videos about painting faces near the end of this video, cause I messed up the footage of this stage again. Also, I strongly recommend watching episode 0 of this series where I talk about preparations, tools, brushes and paint mixing. Part 1. Color choices. Let's start by looking at this artwork. The most important color, in my opinion, is a very vibrant green on the feathers. I want to paint them shiny, somewhat like peacock feathers. I'm going to use Spring Green from the Scale Color Artist range as my base color, highlight it by adding cold yellow and cold white, and mix some blue ink in the shadows. His apron seems white, but if you look closer you will find out there is more to this material. I'm going to paint it mostly with cold white and some carbon black mixed in, but I'm also going to add a tiny bit of blue to this mix. I will also use various colors to produce stains. His trousers and vest look grey, but again I believe it's not a pure mix of black and white. In my case, I will mix in a lot of blue ink here. For his skin, I will mix red oxide with a lot of white and some yellow. Instead of red oxide, you can use Dumble Brown from Citadel, or mix some intense red with green. Or just use a reddy skin color. Sadly, I won't show you much of this stage in this video. Bad Mateusz. There are some brown elements there, but I will paint them with other already used colors. For wood and gold elements, I will also use some washes made from sepia ink and ultra matte varnish. Finally, I want all my minis from this set to have shiny golden accents, so I will paint his shoulder pad, jewelry and base with metallic gold paint. But I don't want to steal too much attention, so I will put a lot of effort in reducing its reflectiveness. If you want to find a list of paints and materials I use, I am listing them in the description of every video. Also, I strongly recommend using colors you already own. You don't need to buy exactly what I have. If you're looking for a counterparts, I'll link a useful chart in the description. Part 2. Color blocking. Okay, let's start painting. I've got this mini already cleaned and primed. If you want to know how, check out episode 0 of this series. The first step for me is to pick paints I'm going to use and add them to my palette. On the left you can see paints and inks I'm going to use for wings and ribbons. On the upper middle, I added few drops of my cold white paint, and on the bottom a few drops of black. I'm doing it this way so I can mix colors without contaminating all the paints I have. On the right I add colors I will use for skin and to mix some browns to the other areas. I also add some glazing medium just in case I need to thin something down. I'm not adding my metallic paint and ink I will use later for washing, because I don't want to accidentally mix it with other paints. Now let's put some paint onto the mini. I'm starting with his grey costume. I mixed some black and white, added a tiny bit of blue ink and painted all the areas. I applied it, making sure to get into all crevices and holes. You need to know that I'm not stressing too much about painting in an uniform, even way. I'm going to add some more layers on top of the first ones, so unevenness will just add more texture. I also added some warm brown to this mix and painted this blanket on his shoulder. I think that a little warmer grey will add some nice contrast. Secondly, I painted wings and ribbons with spring green thinned down with sub-green ink. I'm interested mainly in getting into all crevices. Next, I mixed my skin color. I mixed red oxide with white and added quite much yellow oxide to the mix, because I believe the specialist is a little older guy, so his skin shouldn't be so ruddy. I also added a tiny bit of black and created another pool of paint on my palette to create a shadow color. I applied both onto his flesh, taking special care of his neck, because I believe it will be hard to reach when I paint everything else. After that, I added red oxide to the black and painted stilts, base and all golden parts, paying attention to paint evenly in the borders of materials. Later I will paint it much lighter, but I will leave some of this dark color as a separation lines. Also, it is much better as an undercoat for gold metallic paints than black, in my opinion. Finally, I used some of the mix from his trousers and added a lot of white to create his apron color. White is generally a very tricky color to shade and highlight. My trick to that is to add some other color to the mix. So in this example, tiny bit of blue, and start by creating a mid-tone. Later on I will add some delicate shadows and strong highlights, basing on this specific color. At this stage, I already felt that these colors work for me and I'm not planning to change their hue. Green stands out nicely already, and I see that golden metallic parts will contrast with the matte finish of the figure. Part 3. Volume building, textures and details. Now let's add some depth to the grey parts. I believe that shadows are not dark enough, so I added some black paint and blue ink to the mix. I applied it in crevices, down-facing parts and near the borders of other colors. I also added it to the vertical areas for now. I think it is very important to shade all the wrinkles on the fabric carefully. I try to work quite fast, because if I add the next layer while the previous one is still active, I will get a nicer transition. Now I mixed more white to get a secondary highlight color, just a little brighter than mid-tone. It is very fluid right now, and I'm focused on how much and where it is applied. In example, I applied 2 coats on the top of his thigh, but the second one is a little smaller and focused on more risen parts. On the other hand, I apply only 1 thin layer on the vertical area on the leg, not even bothering for this layer to be even. I'm just trying to avoid areas under the wrinkles and the deepest crevices. Finally, I added even more white and painted only the top of the thigh, knees and edges of the wrinkles. Now the apron. On the artwork I can see some kind of yellow and green stains, and it inspired me a little. I thinned down heavily some paints on my palette, like yellow oxide and its mix with red oxide, and added some random stains all around the apron, avoiding parts with a lot of detail. This will be barely visible after we add some layers, but visible nonetheless. Now I need some shadows. I used some of the trousers highlight color and mixed it with apron color and tested it out few times until it felt right. and I applied it on the Mini. Then I cleaned it up with a mid-tone color. Highlighted it by adding white to the mix and added final highlights with clean cold white. Also, in the end, I made some more stains. The placement of these layers work on the same principle as for trousers. You want the purest highlights only on the areas facing up and on some edges, and you want to have a shadow on down-facing areas, and near the borders with other colors. There is also a nice trick with the white color. You can thin down some paints you used to paint neighboring areas and add some of them nearby. White is a color that reflects a lot of light from the surroundings, so in example, some green near the wings will only add credibility. Now the wings. I want to create an impression of a shiny feathers. Something like peacocks. I believe the trick here is to use a color theory. Usually, when we think of shadows and highlights, we tend to add black or white. But this way we desaturate colors. The other way is to use color luminosity. Long story short, some colors appear brighter to your eye and some darker. In general, yellow is the brightest color, and the violet and navy blue are darkest. With that knowledge, we can mix some blue with our green to paint shadows and add yellow to the highlights. This way we will end up with vibrant colors all around. My way of painting these feathers is to paint all the hair strings with the secondary highlight and only the upper ones with the brightest color. Then I created a wash by mixing sap-green ink with Prussian blue ink and some matte varnish to reduce ink's natural glossiness. I ended up with this dark turquoise, which I applied all over the wings. When it is dry, I come back with highlights. This time starting with the mix of green with a lot of yellow and using sharp brush strokes to paint the hair strings of the upper facing areas. Finally, I added some white and painted some dots on the edges of the feathers, using only the tip of my brush. The trick here is to load only a little of very thin paint onto your brush, so you have a lot of control of how much you apply and where. Now few words about a blanket on Scientist's shoulder. I believe it needed to be a different color than the trousers and his suit, or it would look boring. On the other hand, I don't want to steal attention from wings and golden details. You can paint it the same way as trousers by adding some warm color instead of blue, but in my case, I've gone even further and applied thinned down red oxide to shadows and vertical areas, not even trying to be even. This way it has a different feel and I believe looks like a different kind of material, in example like a knitted blanket. As for stilts, I used very simple technique. I added some yellow oxide to the dark brown I used as a base layer and painted them with the side of my brush. I repeated this step 2 times, adding more yellow and some white in the last one, but loading less and less paint to the brush with each step. The last one was almost a dry brush. Finally, I made a wash from sepia ink and ultra matte varnish, but you can use a reddish shade or wash, in example Agrax Earth Shade from Citadel. I believe this is the easiest way to accent wood grain on this kind of sculpt. Just remember to add more of the bright color on top-facing surfaces and edges. Cold parts are a bit trickier if you want to paint them metallic. They can easily steal all the attention and look out of place. My solution for this is to first paint all of them with plain gold metallic paint, but leaving the borders near the other areas. Next, prepare a dark brown wash, the same as for wood, but this time a ultra matte varnish in the mix is a must. After a layer of 2, it will reduce most of the shine of the gold. Larger surfaces like his shoulder pad are even trickier. I'm using a wash differently with each layer. The first one is overall. The second leaves a tiny island on the top, and the third one goes only on the sides. When it is dry, I paint all the edges with gold again, but this time only with the side of my brush. I also stipple some of it on the top of the shoulder pad, with only a tiny bit of paint on my brush. I'm also coming back to this part when the mini is finished and fully dry, and apply pure ultra matte varnish on the sides of this spot and wherever I feel the shine is too strong. Oh, and don't forget that the base shouldn't steal attention from the mini, so apply the wash profusely and avoid adding too much of the metallic paint again. So now I should tell you how to paint a skin, but again, the footage was terrible. Instead, I can recommend you watching one interesting video about colors on the faces and a super informative video series about placing shadows. They both are from outside of our hobby, but believe me, they are worth watching. And here is a final result. I believe I found a theme for my whole set of Etherfields. I will paint them with washed out greyish colors all around, with one or two strong color accents and some golden metallic parts. And that's it. If you found this video useful or just interesting, leave a like or comment. Subscribing is also a nice way to not miss future videos and to make me proud of my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye!